Hi everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey Christine.
Hey Trace, what's going on today? What are we getting into? What are you going to tell me about?
Well, today's case is one of those stories that feels, at first, almost too simple to understand. A teenage girl leaves home one night. She tells her family she'll be back soon. She gets into her car, and then she disappears. But what happened next stretched from Battle Creek, Michigan, all the way to Oklahoma, and then to California, before circling back home to a courtroom where 3 teenagers would be forced to answer for what happened to another teenager.
So this is one of those Michigan cases that crosses a couple of state lines and ends up back up in Michigan.
Sure does, and that's part of what makes it so haunting, because this wasn't a stranger in the shadows. This wasn't someone Christa had never seen before. This was a girl who thought she was going to meet someone she knew. And by the time anyone truly understood what had happened, 17-year-old Christa Lynne Ruth Ferree was hundreds of miles away from home.
17 years old. That's still a kid.
And the part that I can't stop thinking about is this. Everyone at the center of this case was young. Christa was 17. 2 of the boys convicted in her murder were 17, and 1 was 16. But only 3 of them got the chance to become adults. Only 3 of them got birthdays, aging faces, parole hearings, lawyers, appeals, and decades to explain what they did. Christa did not. Today's case is one of those stories that feels at first almost too simple to understand, but before we go any further, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to one of our listeners, Jessica Elliott, who suggested we look into Christa's story. Jessica, thank you for trusting us with this case suggestion. Stories like this can sit quietly in old newspapers, court records, family memories, and small community grief for decades. And sometimes it takes one person saying, "This story still matters," to bring a name back into the light. As we begin, we carry that with us. Christa's story still matters.
Before we begin, a content warning. Today's episode discusses the murder of a teenage girl, strangulation, juvenile offenders, drug references raised during court proceedings and reporting, and the long-term grief of a family after violent loss. We will not sensationalize Christa's death. We will not reduce her to the worst thing that happened to her. And where details are unclear, are not fully supported by public records available to us, we'll say that.
Because here, the story matters, but the truth matters more. Battle Creek, Michigan in 1991 was a city with layers. People know Battle Creek for cereal boxes, factories, train tracks, neighbors built by working families, and school where everyone seemed to know someone who knew someone else. It was big enough to have secrets. Small enough that when something terrible happened, people felt the ripple. And in the spring of 1991, one of those ripples began with a girl from Harper Creek High School. Her name was Christa Lynne Ruth Ferree. She was 17 years old, a junior, a daughter, a sister, a classmate, a girl with thick hair and bright eyes and the kind of face that still looks out from old photographs like time forgot to warn her.
I'm looking at her face right now from the pictures that you're sending over to me, and she looks so young. Like she still had so much life ahead of her.
She did. And that's why I wanted to start with who she was before we talk about what happened to her. Because Christa was not a headline. She was not a case number. She was not just the girl found in Oklahoma. She was born in Battle Creek. She was a lifelong city resident. She attended Harper Creek High School, and according to the Harper Creek Educational Foundation, Christa was remembered as someone involved, energetic, and full of motion. She played baseball. She had been a cheerleader. She served as vice president of her class. She liked long bike rides. She loved stray animals. That detail stays with me because there is something so tender about a teenage girl who sees the stray animals no one else stops for, the ones that wander too close to roads, the ones people shoo away, the ones that need food or a hand or just someone to notice they exist. And Christa noticed.
It tells you a lot about a person when they care about helpless creatures like that. She was kind, you could tell.
Yeah, she was, and it does matter. And in one newspaper article published after her death, her father, Gareth Ferree, remembered her with a kind of grief that still cuts through the print. He remembered her smile, her laugh, her eyes, her energy. He remembered that she worried about other people. He remembered that she was independent, maybe stubborn in the way teenagers are when they're trying to become themselves. She wanted her own life. She wanted to earn her own money. She worked at Ponderosa Steakhouse. She was taking classes at the Vocational Education Center. She had even thought about modeling. Now, there's a photograph connected to that article. Christa is sitting on a motorcycle, looking toward the camera. The caption said she had thought about a modeling career and that her father took the picture. And there's something quietly devastating about that. A father taking pictures of his daughter, not knowing that one day those pictures would become evidence of everything the world lost.
Yeah, and as a parent, thinking about that father taking those pictures in the first place, you take those pictures thinking about the future, that one day in the future you'll look back on that moment that you're taking a picture of with fond memories. And in this case, that's not what happened with those pictures. It's kind of devastating.
It really is. They're thinking, maybe she'll look back at this one day. Maybe this will be funny. Maybe this will be something she shows her own kids. Maybe this is just one season of her life. But Christa would never get another season. Christa's parents were Sharon and Gareth Ferree. Her obituary listed her mother, Sharon, in Battle Creek, and her father, Gareth, in Ceresco. It also listed her brother, Curtis, of Battle Creek. And from the reporting I found, Christa and Curtis were close, very close. In fact, the article said that before her death, Christa had moved to 120 Kane Street with her brother and his fiancée. Her father said she and her brother had been living together, and it sounded like that relationship mattered deeply to her. Now, there she had responsibilities. She had people checking in on her. She had a mother who would later walk into the Battle Creek Police Department and say her 17-year-old daughter was missing. And she had a father who, after everything, would sit with a reporter and try to explain the impossible. 1 year after Christa was buried, Gareth said all that was left were photographs and memories. Think about that. 1 year, just 12 months. From school and work and phone calls and teenage plans to just photographs.
Yeah, that's too much. That's too much to think about like that. That's unbearable.
And Gareth's grief is one of the emotional anchors of this case. Because in that article, he wasn't just talking about the night Christa died. He was talking about the relationship they were rebuilding before she died. He said that in the days before her murder, he and Christa had talked for hours. He said they cleared the air. They made peace. He said he was proud to have her as his daughter. And I keep coming back to that because grief is cruel in many directions. Sometimes it leaves you with the conversation you never got to have. But sometimes, almost more painfully, it leaves you with the conversation you did have. The one that finally started to heal something, and then time runs out anyway.
That almost makes it worse. If it happened the way he says it happened, it's like he got her back emotionally, but then lost her completely. But I'm not gonna lie, my sneaky suspicion spidey senses are hinting at a little bit of post-mortem rose-colored glasses.
Right? I mean, I know raising teenage daughters, it can be rough.
Yeah.
So.
And 17, they're barely getting out of the bitch stage. I'm just going to chalk that up to a parent seeing the rosier side of the potential where things were going. Because somehow, I don't know, call it the mom in me, is not thinking that 17-year-old was starting to have a better relationship with our parents yet.
Exactly.
But I don't know why that's even triggering for me. I mean, it has nothing to do with the story. So let me just leave it as he's telling it and go from there.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Your big mom. And I think that's why this case stayed with him in such a visible way. He wasn't only mourning the daughter he lost, he was mourning the future they were just starting to reach for. Now, we need to be honest about another layer in the reporting. Some trial testimony and later articles referenced drug use. One article said testimony showed Christa had cocaine in her bloodstream, and some witnesses said they knew she had used drugs. We are not going to ignore that because it appears in the public record and it became part of how the case was argued. But we are also not going to allow that detail to become a shortcut. Because too often, when a victim is young, when a victim is imperfect, when a victim has used drugs or been around people making dangerous choices, the story starts to tilt. Suddenly, the question becomes, why was she there? Instead of, why did they kill her? And Gareth Ferree pushed back against that framing. He did not accept the idea that his daughter's life could be summarized by that one detail. To him, Christa was not a label. She was not a cautionary tale. She was a teenage girl. Complicated, growing, loved, and still becoming herself.
Yes, and that is very important to remember. No one mistake or no one triumph will truly give you the details of any human being. The fact that she may or may not have done drugs does not explain away what happened to her. That in and of itself drives me bonkers when people like to start blaming the victim when that's not what we're talking about here. The wrong is the problem. The wrong is what we need to evaluate.
That's exactly right. A teenager can trust the wrong friend and still deserve to come home. A teenager can be in the wrong car with the wrong people on the wrong night and still be the victim of a crime. And Christa was the victim. Now, there is one detail from the reporting that feels like a shadow passing over the story before the murder ever happens. On March 14th, 1991, just a few weeks before Christa was killed, she was in her 1983 Buick with Thomas Krause II and Brad Warner when the car was totaled in a crash at M66 and Beckley Road. Now, no one was seriously injured, but that detail matters because it places Christa in the same orbit as two of the boys who would later be convicted in her murder. It tells us this wasn't random. These weren't strangers who saw a girl at a gas station and decided to take her car. These were people she knew. People who had been around her. People who had already been inside her vehicle.
Yeah, that should give everybody the chills because it means the danger was already close to her because she was already inviting it in. She was already, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And Gareth said something after her death that tells us Christa had already been warned, or at least that people around her had concerns. The article said Christa's cousin worried about her friends. Her father said Christa was concerned about other people. She cared about them. And sometimes that is one of the most dangerous things about a good heart. A person who cares can believe they're helping. They can believe someone just needs a ride. They can believe someone just needs a chance. They can believe they know the difference between trouble and danger. But the trouble doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it calls you by name. Monday, April 1st, 1991. April Fool's Day. The beginning of spring in Michigan. That strange season where winter hasn't fully let go, but people are already pretending it has. Christa was 17. She was living at 120 Kane Street in Battle Creek. From the missing person language I found, police said she was last seen between 9 and 10 p.m. when she left home to visit a friend. That is the part that feels so ordinary. She left home to visit a friend. Not to run away, not to vanish, not to go on a long trip, just to visit a friend.
Yeah, and that's what makes it scary, especially for parents everywhere, because that's just something everybody would believe, take it at face value.
Because at 17, hey, I'm going to go see a friend is not unusual. Maybe someone calls. Maybe you say, I'll be back in a little while. And the people who love you believe that because most of the time it's true. Most of the time, the car comes back into the driveway. The door opens. The teenager walks in too late. Maybe gets a lecture. Maybe rolls her eyes. Maybe laughs. Maybe says, I know, I'm sorry. And life keeps going. But that night, life did not keep going. Christa left. And she did not come home. By the next day, Tuesday, April 2nd, there was still no sign of Christa. No sign of her car. No sign that she had simply stayed out too late. And her mother, Sharon, did what her mother does, when fear hardens into certainty. She went to the police. The Battle Creek Police Department began searching for a 17-year-old girl who had vanished after leaving home. The public missing person information said Christa Ferree of 120 Kane Street had been missing since Monday. It said she was last seen between 9 and 10 p.m. leaving home to visit a friend. And according to that notice, Sergeant Joe Newman was connected to the early police information. At that stage, investigators had a missing teenager, a missing car, a last known plan, and a terrifying unknown.
Well, I don't even have to ask that the parents were already probably freaking out and thinking she was in a ditch somewhere, as the saying goes. But did the police, do we have any idea, like, was everyone else highly concerned that she was missing? Or did they think immediately something bad had happened?
Well, from what I have, it sounds like the investigation began quickly. But we do not have enough to say exactly when police moved from missing teen to possible foul play. What I can say is that they began looking into who Christa planned to meet. They spoke with family, friends, and classmates, and eventually, the direction of the investigation began to point towards someone in Christa's circle, a friend, Thomas Eugene Krause II. In later court reporting, prosecutors would say Krause helped lure Christa to meet John Seeley Loepke Jr. and Brad Trevor Warner. And that word matters. Lure. It means she was brought somewhere under a false pretense. It means trust was used as a weapon.
The old funny betrayal of teenagers against each other. Especially if she thought she was just meeting her friends and they set her up. I mean, the last Malice conversation we had was something similar, where the girl was with her friends and she didn't think anything of it because she just thought they were new friends, you know?
Yep. And it changes the emotional shape of the story. Because Christa didn't just encounter danger, she was invited to it. From later reporting, the motive investigators would point to was chillingly simple. They wanted her car. The reports say Christa was killed so her car could be stolen and used to drive west to California. A road trip. That is the word that makes me almost, well, I'm not going to say almost, it makes me angry to say it. Because a road trip is supposed to mean music, gas station snacks, bad directions, laughing too hard in the dark, and the kind of teenage freedom that feels bigger than it is. But in this case, according to the reporting, 3 boys wanted a vehicle badly enough that Christa became disposable to them. And that is one of the hardest parts of this case. The motive was not jealousy. It was not a long-running feud. It was not self-defense. It was not a moment of panic after some unavoidable tragedy. It was a car, a way out, a way west, a teenage fantasy built on the stolen life of a girl who thought she was coming home.
Utterly senseless. Completely and utterly senseless. I'd like to say it's impossible to process, but unfortunately, I mean, I'm friends with you, so I hear all these horror stories all the time. And yeah, by the way, I grew up where I grew up, where people just do stupid shit and take advantage of other people because of their own infantile need to have or do what other people have or do without putting in the work to have it themselves. So the fact that she was discarded like that for somebody else's whim to have what she had. I want to say that it's impossible to process, but unfortunately, we're told the stories time and time again. But somehow, even though my bitter, jaded self is like, yeah, I get it. They're dirtbags and they had no regard for her life. The empathetic part of me wants to be like, but why? Like, that's not a good enough answer ever. Never. I don't know. It's impossible to come to terms with.
I couldn't agree more. How about you push her out of the car and steal the car?
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Unreal.
But that's the thing with motives. Like, motives are really just reasons and understandings that the rest of us need to have to understand that sometimes evil is just freaking evil.
Yeah, and for two 17-year-olds and a 16-year-old to plan this, to murder her, to take her car, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Something's really wrong with these boys.
Exactly. Something was wrong with them. That's the key factor there.
Yeah. And when crimes are this senseless, we sometimes search for something deeper because our minds want a reason that matches the size of the loss. But sometimes there just isn't one. Sometimes the reason is so small. The damage is enormous. And the person who pays the price is the only one who didn't choose any of it. For 4 days, Christa was missing. And then on Sunday, April 7th, 1991, a body was found near Clinton, Oklahoma, in Custer County. Now, Clinton is not close to Battle Creek. It's not a neighboring town. It's not even a neighboring state. It's hundreds and hundreds of miles away. To get from Battle Creek, Michigan to Clinton, Oklahoma, you cross state lines, rivers, highways, and hours of open road. You leave the familiar behind. The roads flatten. The landscape changes. And somewhere near Clinton, a teenage girl from Michigan was found far from the people who were searching for her. The Oklahoman reported that a body found Sunday near Clinton had been identified as a teenage girl missing from Michigan. Authorities identified her as Christa Ferree, 17, of Battle Creek. Her obituary would later state she was found dead Sunday, April 7th, near Clinton, Oklahoma, as a result of strangulation.
By the time her family found out, her body was still all the way in Oklahoma.
Yes, and I want people to sit with that, because distance becomes part of the trauma here. It's not only that Christa was killed, it's that she was taken so far from home. Her family wasn't searching a nearby road or a friend's house or a local parking lot anymore. They were suddenly being told that the answer was in Oklahoma. And there is something uniquely cruel about that. To lose someone violently is one kind of horror. To learn that they were carried across the country, away from every person who loved them, is another. A year later, in 1992, the Battle Creek Inquirer published an article with a headline that read, "4 Lives Wasted." The subheading said, "Daughter's murder still haunts father." And that phrase, 4 lives wasted, is complicated. Because I understand what the headline was trying to say. Christa's life was taken. 3 boys threw away their futures. 4 young lives were destroyed by one terrible crime. But we need to be very clear. Only one of those 4 did not get a choice. Only one of those 4 was murdered. Only one of those 4 did not get to grow older. And that was Christa.
And that is very important to say and to make that distinction. I am glad you said that, because there's a huge difference between wasting your own life and taking someone else's life.
Exactly. And Gareth Ferree knew that difference better than anyone. After Christa's death, he said he had lost ambition. He said he had not worked for a year. He said he told himself, "You lose your focus, that's all it's about. What's the reason for life?" That is what murder does to the people left behind. It doesn't only take the victim. It changes the gravity in every room the victim used to walk into. It changes parents. It changes siblings. It changes friends. It changes the way people answer the phone, the way they look at headlights in the driveway, the way they feel when someone says, "I'll be right back." Gareth remembered that Christa could see through people. He said she was nice. He said he was proud of her, and that she was around people who would have taken care of her. He remembered her as someone who wanted to make money, not to get married or have someone take care of her, but to run her own life. He said, in essence, she was not someone who needed a man to prove her worth. And that matters, because Christa was at an age where she was starting to define herself, not as a child, not yet fully as an adult, but somewhere in that fragile middle space where every decision feels like a door. Work, school, friends, family, love, independence. She was trying to decide who she was going to be, and then someone else decided she would not get to become that person. There is one more detail from that article that I keep circling back to: the night of her death. Christa had stopped at a store to buy Easter candy for a friend. That is such a small detail, and sometimes the small details are the ones that undo you, because it tells us what kind of world she thought she was still living in. A world where you buy candy, a world where you meet a friend, a world where Monday night is just Monday night, a world where you can be 17 and busy and maybe a little distracted and thinking about work or school or someone you care about. A world where you expect to come home. She didn't know that the people waiting for her had already turned her into part of a plan. She did not know that her car mattered more to them than her life. She did not know that by Sunday, strangers in Oklahoma would be saying her name.
A detail about the Easter candy, I hear what you're saying. It sticks with you because it lets you know, it gives you a reminder about what kind of kid this kid was, because she was a kid still at 17. She was heading out to go hang out with her friends, but she was stopping to get candy for a friend for Easter the next day. And also, there's a part of me that maybe she stopped to get candy for the people who ended up murdering her. Let me just think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I don't like that thought. That makes me ill.
Yeah, but it points to the fact that she totally felt safe.
Yeah.
She totally felt fun, like this was going to be fun hanging out with a friend.
Right, because it's human. And it's not dramatic, it's not cinematic, it's just a teenage girl doing something kind. And then the world turns. By the time investigators began piecing the case together, 3 names would come into focus: Thomas Eugene Krause II, John Seeley Loepke Jr., Brad Trevor Warner. Krause and Loepke were 17, Warner was 16. All 3 would eventually be convicted in Christa's murder. All 3 would receive life sentences without the possibility of parole. And for years, That seemed like the final legal answer. But this case would not end in 1991. It would not end at sentencing. It would not end when Christa was buried at Riverside Cemetery in Union City. Decades later, the case would return to court. Not because Christa came back, not because the loss changed, but because the law changed. The boys who killed her had been juveniles, and the United States Supreme Court would eventually rule that mandatory life without parole for juveniles was unconstitutional. That ruling would reopen cases across the country, including this one. And that meant Christa's family would have to revisit the nightmare again. They would have to hear arguments about youth, rehabilitation, remorse, brain development, second chances, and all of that would be weighed against the one thing Christa never received: a future.
Oof, that is a hard legal and emotional place to be, because yeah, they were young, they were juveniles, but so was she. And it was a very calculated murder. It was definitively kind of first degree. So hopefully you're going to tell me that it stuck.
Well,
Oy.
Now that is the exact wound at the center of this story. They were young, but so was Christa. They were teenagers, so was Christa. They had families, so did she. They had potential, as did Christa. The difference is their potential became something lawyers could argue about decades later. Christa's potential became memory, a scholarship, a grave marker, a father's grave printed in black ink, a photograph of a girl sitting on a motorcycle still looking toward a future she would never reach. Silence becomes a clock. Silence becomes the moment a mother realizes this is not teenage irresponsibility. This is something else.
I don't like that part either, because at first, as a parent, you're mad. Like, where is she? Doesn't she know better than this? Like you're mad at your child. But then after a while, it turns into panic, and you start worrying. Why hasn't she called? But then it turns into flat out horrific fear. The longer the clock ticks, the worse the fear gets. So it's like this roller coaster of raw negative emotions the whole time.
Right, all your worst fears.
Yeah.
And that transition can happen fast. One minute a parent's frustrated, the next they are replaying that last conversation, the last look, the last sentence. Did she seem upset? Did she say who she was meeting? Did she take anything with her? Was there someone she trusted who maybe she shouldn't have? And in Christa's case, that last question would become painfully important, because investigators would eventually come to believe that Christa had not simply disappeared. She had been pulled into a plan involving people she knew, a plan that would move from Michigan roads to Oklahoma dirt and then all the way west.
Hey, did they ever say who that initial friend that she was going to see, who that was supposed to be?
The publicly available sources I have do not give us a clean, fully sourced original police timeline naming every detail from that night. But later court reporting does give us one very important piece. Prosecutors would later say that Thomas Eugene Krause II helped lure Christa to meet Seeley Loepke Jr. and Brad Trevor Warner. That means investigators believed Christa was not just wandering into danger. She was brought to it. And that word lure changes everything, because luring someone usually requires some kind of trust, a familiar voice, a believable reason, a person who does not seem dangerous enough to fear.
Yeah, and that in and of itself makes it super personal, because they used her own trust against her. They manipulated her into it.
They absolutely did. And that is one of the cruelest forms of violence. Not just the physical act, but the betrayal before it. The moment someone believes they are safe because they recognize a face or a voice or a name, the moment someone thinks, I know him, and then that trust becomes the doorway. The 3 names connected to Christa's murder were not faceless strangers, they were teenagers. Thomas Eugene Krause II, John Seeley Loepke Jr., Brad Trevor Warner. And as I mentioned, Krause and Loepke were 17 and Warner was 16. They were close enough to Christa's world that she had been in a car with at least some of them before. Remember, just weeks earlier on March 14th, Christa had been in her 1983 Buick with Thomas Krause and Brad Warner when that vehicle was totaled in a crash at M66 and Beckley Road. No one was seriously hurt, but that detail carries a chilling overlap. She knew them. They had been near her. They had been in her car. They were not distant shadows. They were already part of the landscape around her.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something that you say all the time. That danger doesn't always look like danger.
Sometimes danger looks like a friend who needs a ride. A classmate. Someone you've already been around. Someone your family may know by name. Someone who has already crossed your path enough times that your guard is down. And for teenagers, that is especially dangerous. Because at 17, most people are still learning that familiarity is not the same as safety. You can know someone and still not know what they're capable of. You can share a school, a neighborhood, a friend group, a car ride, and still miss the darkness gathering behind someone's eyes. Now, from later reporting, investigators and prosecutors believed the motive was painfully simple. The boys just wanted Christa's car. They wanted to leave Michigan. They wanted to go west to California. And Christa, prosecutors said, was killed so they could take the vehicle and make that trip. I want to stay with that for a moment because when you say it out loud, it almost refuses to make sense. A human life for a car. A 17-year-old girl for transportation. A daughter, sister, classmate, co-worker, and friend for a teenage escape plan.
It is sickening. They reduced her to an obstacle, and they overcame that obstacle through her death.
Christa became, in their plan, something in the way. Not someone, something. And that is how a lot of violence begins. Before the act itself, there is usually a mental step where the victim is made smaller, less real, less human, less important than whatever the offender wants. And in this case, what they wanted appears to have been movement, distance, a way out, a road west. And there is something deeply, deeply disturbing about that. Because for a teenager, a car often represents freedom. But in this case, that symbol of freedom became the reason Christa lost hers forever. And this is where we need to be very careful with the details. There are retellings of this case that include more specific claims about where Christa was asked to go, exactly where she met the boys, and exactly what happened inside that vehicle. But some of those details are difficult to verify through publicly available sources without access to old newspaper archives or full court transcripts. So here is what I can say responsibly. Christa left home on April 1st, 1991. She was believed to be going to visit someone she knew. Prosecutors later said Thomas Krause helped lure her to meet Seeley Loepke and Brad Warner. Investigators later determined she was strangled. Her body was found days later near Clinton, Oklahoma, and all 3 boys were convicted in connection with her murder. That is the verified spine. The rest, the exact route, the exact location of the killing, the exact movements of every person involved, remains harder to reconstruct from public records.
It is tempting to use every detail if it makes the story more vivid, but if you can't prove it, you shouldn't do it.
100%. And that matters even more in a case like this, because we are talking about a murdered teenager. We are talking about living family members. We are talking about people who were convicted, resentenced, and later paroled. Accuracy is not optional. So when we do not have something nailed down, we are going to say so. But we do have enough to understand the shape of what happened. She was lured, she was killed, her body was transported far from Michigan, and the boys connected to her death did not stay in Battle Creek. They kept going. Now, Clinton sits along Interstate 40 in western Oklahoma, a long way from Battle Creek, a long way from Harper Creek High School, a long way from the streets where Christa's family and friends were waiting for answers. And for a moment, think about what that means. Someone in Oklahoma found a girl who did not belong to that place. Someone who had not left Michigan for adventure. Someone who had not run away to start over. Someone who had been taken there after death. A teenage girl from Battle Creek left hundreds of miles from the people who knew her face.
I'm not even sure why. I really can't put my finger on why the distance adds to the cruelty. It feels cruel. Like, even after what they did, they took her away from everyone who loved her. So, like, if the plan was to take her car, why not just kick her out of it and take the car? Like, why did they have to kill her? Why did they have to then take her along for the ride and far, far, far away from our family and anyone who would care about her remains? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's extra cruelty.
It is. I mean, imagine being her family, her friends, searching for someone desperately that you love, and they're not even here. Like, not even close. And the other thing is, you know, you're crossing state lines. That is a federal problem now, on top of everything else, right? And the other thing that just strikes me with these 3 young boys, they decided that the mode of action they were going to take to kill her was strangulation. That's not an easy thing to do. And that's right up close and personal. They wanted to cause her as much devastation as possible.
The thing is when I hear strangulation, I'm hearing a lot more other things are happening other than the strangulation. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're not getting into the details, but I don't know why my brain just assumes that.
While her family's worst fear was being confirmed in Oklahoma, at least one of the boys connected to her death was already in California speaking to police.
Okay, so the same day that they found her body, one of the boys is already all the way in California speaking to police?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And based on the appellate record I found, Krause gave a statement in California on April 7th. He later gave another statement in Michigan on April 16th. Now, the appeal centered partly on whether those statements should have been suppressed, and the Michigan Court of Appeals ultimately affirmed his conviction. That tells us several important things. First, the investigation crossed state lines. Second, law enforcement had enough contact with Krause in California to obtain a statement within days of Christa's disappearance. And third, whatever Krause told police became important enough to challenge later in court.
That sounds like there were a lot of things happening with a lot of different forces in play. I mean, they were happening pretty fast in Michigan, Oklahoma, and California all at once.
Yeah. And for a case that begins with one missing teenager leaving home at night, that map expands almost violently. Battle Creek, Clinton, Oklahoma, California, and later back to Michigan. It becomes a case of movement. The movement of a car, the movement of a body, the movement of information between police departments. But at the center of it all is a girl who should have been going nowhere more dramatic than back home. The appellate record for Thomas Krause gives us a narrow legal window into the investigation. It says Krause made statements to police on April 7th of 91 in California and again in April of 91. His defense later argued those statements should not have been admitted. But the court disagreed. His conviction stood. Now, appellate opinions often do not give the full emotional story. They are not written like narratives. They are written to answer legal questions. Like, was the statement admissible? Was a procedure proper? Was a defendant's right violated? Was a conviction legally sound? So while that record does not give us every detail we want, it does confirm that Krause's words to police became a legal issue in the case. And that matters. Because in a case with multiple teenagers, multiple states, and a victim transported far from home, statements can become the threads investigators use to stitch the story together. Who called Christa? Who planned what? Who was in the car? Where did they go? When did she die? What did each person know? What did each person do? Those questions would become central.
And with 3 people involved, there's no question that they were all doing the shell game. And who did what and whose idea was what. I imagine everyone starts trying to shift the blame to the other people.
Yeah, that's true. And that often happens in group crimes. One person minimizes, another says they were just there, another says someone else's idea. One person says they panicked, another said they didn't think it would go that far. And sometimes there may be pieces of truth mixed into self-preservation. But the legal outcome in this case was clear. All 3 were convicted. All 3 were held responsible. The 3 boys connected to Christa's murder were young enough to still be considered juveniles in the way we talk about brain development and sentencing today. But they were charged and sentenced in a system that, at the time, allowed no second look. That was 1991. The legal language was severe. First-degree murder, life without parole. No release date, no path home. No later hearing built into the sentence. And after trial, that is what happened. Thomas Krause, John Loepke, Brad Warner, 3 teenagers convicted in murder of another teenager, sentenced to spend the rest of their lives in prison.
Well, at least at the time, perhaps the parents felt like that was justice.
They did. And for many people. And we need to remember the context. Christa was 17. She was strangled. She was taken from Michigan, dropped in Oklahoma. Her family was devastated. Her father's life was visibly broken by grief. Her mother had reported her missing and then had to receive the worst possible answer. So when the court imposed life without parole, many people likely saw that as final, not healing, because justice does not heal everything, but at least final. A line was drawn, a punishment that matched the enormity of what had been taken. But decades later, the law would change, and what once seemed final could become open again. Now, before we move into the courtroom, I want to stay for a moment with the family, because investigations and arrests can create the illusion that things are moving toward resolution. But for families, resolution is not the same as justice. And justice is not the same as getting someone back. Life did what life always does in the most unfair way possible. It continued. School continued. People went to work. The restaurant still opened. Cars still passed Harper Creek. Spring moved forward. Easter came and went. But Christa was not there.
And that's the part people, I guess, sometimes forget. The world keeps moving, and the family is stuck in that one moment.
And Gareth Ferree spoke about that stuckness in the article published a year later. He talked about losing focus, losing ambition, trying to understand what the point of life was after something like that. He talked about missing the way she saw things. He talked about being proud of her. Those are the words of a father trying to keep his daughter alive in memory while living in a world that has already moved her into the past tense. And that is one reason we are telling this story the way we are. Because Christa deserves more than the court summary. She deserves more than found in Oklahoma. She deserves more than killed in a car. She deserves the fullness of being remembered. When a murder case enters the public record, it becomes something people can discuss from a distance. They talk about motive, sentencing, about whether the punishment was too harsh or not harsh enough. They talk about juvenile defenders, Supreme Court rulings, resentencing, parole eligibility, rehabilitation, and those are important conversations. We are going to have them, but there's always danger when the legal conversation becomes larger than the victim, because the offenders grow older inside the file. Their prison records develop, their behavior is documented, their remorse is evaluated, their lawyers file motions, hearings are scheduled, their futures become a question. But Christa remains 17, always 17. There are no adult photographs of her, no career, no wedding, no children, if she wanted them. No middle-aged laugh that sounds like the teenage one her father remembered. No new vision of Christa, only the one frozen in 1991.
All the more reason that resentencing is so painful. They get to show who they became when she never got to become anyone other than what she was, a 17-year-old girl.
Exactly. And that is not an argument against the law considering youth. It is a reminder that every legal second chance exists beside a life that received none. That tension is the heart of this case.
Even if one person was the only actual one with hands on the strangulation, the other two did nothing to stop it. They were all equally guilty. They were all doing the deed.
That's right. And in the eyes of the law, they were all responsible. And in the eyes of Chris's family, I can only imagine the distinction may have felt painfully inadequate. Because when your daughter is gone, legal nuance does not bring her back. When someone is murdered young, their siblings age past them. Their classmates age past them. Their friends have children who become older than they were. The world continues to produce proof of the years they were denied, and every milestone becomes a measurement. Christa should have turned 18 in January of 92. She should have graduated. She should have had a first apartment or a different job or a new dream. She should have had the chance to make mistakes and fix them. She should have had the chance to become difficult, funny, exhausted, successful, ordinary. extraordinary, whatever life had in store. Instead, she became a memory attached to a scholarship fund, a grave in Riverside Cemetery, a name in a case that the courts would reopen decades later. So I want to go back to that Supreme Court ruling in 2012, where the Supreme Court decided Miller versus Alabama. Now, that case held that mandatory life without parole for juveniles violated the Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. So in plain language, the court said children are different from adults for sentencing purposes. Not innocent, not excused, but different. Their brains are still developing. They may be more impulsive. They may be more vulnerable to peer pressure. They may have a greater capacity for change. And because of that, courts cannot automatically impose life without parole on juveniles without considering their youth and individual circumstances.
Yeah, but you're not about to tell me that meant that they just get out. They still get convicted. They just don't get as harsh of a sentence, right?
Right. And that's important. It does not mean every juvenile convicted of murder gets released. It means the sentence has to be reconsidered. The court has to look again. The judge has to weigh factors that were not properly weighed under mandatory sentencing, like age, maturity, family background, level of participation, possibility of rehabilitation, behavior in prison, remorse, the nature of the crime, and the impact on the victim's family. So for people sentenced as teenagers to mandatory life without parole, cases across the country began moving back into court, including the case of Christa Ferree. Imagine being told almost after 30 years that the sentence you thought was final was no longer final. That the men convicted in your daughter's murder, men who had entered prison as teenagers and grown older behind bars, would now receive new hearings? The court was not saying Christa's murder did not matter. The court was not saying that the convictions were erased. But the legal question had changed. The question was now whether these men should remain sentenced to life without parole, or whether they should be resentenced to a term of years, a sentence that could make parole possible.
The double-edged sword of this. That doesn't really, I don't know. It doesn't sit with me well, because that reopens everything. So it doesn't overturn that conviction in any way. They're all still convicted of first-degree murder. But in order to go through the sentencing part, that means everything the family had already survived, they had to go back through.
That's right. They have to do it all again. Attend those hearings, listen to lawyers talking about the offenders' childhoods, prison behavior, remorse, education, growth, and potential. And every bit of that may be relevant to the law, but emotionally, the family is sitting there with one devastating truth. Christa never got the chance to grow, mature, rehabilitate, change, apologize, or become someone new. She was frozen at 17. Now, one of the men sentenced in this case was Thomas Eugene Krause II. At the time of Christa's murder, Krause was also 17. Now, during the later resentencing proceedings, prosecutors argued against leniency. They pointed to his role in the crime. They said he helped lure Christa to meet John and Brad, and that word returns again, lure. Because the prosecution's position was not simply that Krause was present, it was that he helped bring Christa to the people who would kill her. And that makes his role especially painful to consider. Because if Christa trusted him, even a little, that trust became the mechanism.
And that part's not really easy to get past. Because if someone you know calls you, you don't think this is a trap. That's not your first thought. When he called her and asked her to go with them, I don't think she was thinking this could be a trap.
No, of course not. She's just thinking whatever he told her, so-and-so needs a ride, hey, let's meet up and let's go do A, B, C, D, and E.
Yeah. But All the while, he was knowing full well what their plans were. So he should rot in jail forever.
Absolutely. Now, during his resentencing, he reportedly testified and expressed remorse. Later reporting said he admitted he killed Christa. Judge Sarah Lincoln, who handled resentencing matters in this case, made comments that cut directly to the gravity of what had happened. She described the murder as horrible. She said it was a crime that could have been stopped. And that line matters. A crime that could have been stopped. Because when we talk about group crimes, there are so many moments where someone could have changed the outcome. Someone could have refused. They could have warned her. They could have walked away. They could have said, no, we're not doing this. Someone could have chosen Christa's life over the plan, but no one did.
And that's a powerful point. That's a powerful point to make. It wasn't a one split-second accident. There were chances all along the way to have stopped this.
And that's what makes the motive so devastating. There was not a tragedy that unfolded in a single unavoidable instant. Now, Warner was convicted of first-degree murder in Christa's death. He also received life without parole, and decades later, like Krause and Loepke, he was resentenced. His sentence was changed to a term of 40 to 60 years, and that made parole possible. And that is where this case shifts from past tense crime to present tense consequence. Because the boys who were sentenced to die in prison did not die there. They grew older. They came back before the court, and eventually each received a sentence that opened the door to release. Well, all three were ultimately resentenced to 40 to 60 years, and later, Michigan Department of Correction records show all three reached parole status. But it's important to say that parole status can change. But the broader point is this: the legal system that once said never eventually said maybe. And for Christa's family, that had to feel like the ground shifting underneath a grief that they had already been carrying for decades. 40 to 60 years? That is the sentence each man eventually received. On paper, that is still a serious sentence. It's not nothing. It's not a slap on the wrist. 40 years is a long time. It is the difference between youth and middle age. It's birthdays and holidays, decades, relationships, and entire eras passing outside prison walls. But for a murder victim's family, 40 years can feel very different from forever. Because forever is what Christa received. But Christa was not the crime. Christa was the life before it. And before we close, I want to return to something I said at the beginning. This case came to us because a listener, Jessica Elliott, suggested Christa's story. Jessica, thank you. Because there are cases that remain known within families, schools, neighborhoods, and old newspaper archives, but fade from broader public memory. And sometimes it takes one person saying, "This story still matters," to bring that name forward again. This is part of what community does. It remembers. It asks. It refuses to let someone disappear twice. Christa disappeared once in April of 1991. We do not let her disappear again.
And that's how she should be remembered. That's how we should all remember her. Not as a case, not as a crime, but as a girl who should have come home.
And maybe that is the most honest way to carry the story. Not with easy answers or clean closure, but with a name, a warning, and a promise to pay attention. Because a killer does not always look like a killer. A dangerous plan does not always announce itself. A person can be young and still capable of terrible harm. And trust, beautiful, necessary human trust, can be used by the wrong person as a trap. So listen to your instincts. Teach your kids they are allowed to say no. Be the safe call. Be the person who comes without judgment first. And remember Christa, not only for how she died, but for who she was before anyone took the rest of her story. Christa Lynne Ruth Ferree was 17. She was loved, she was remembered, and she should have come home. If this episode brought up grief, fear, or memories of violence for you, please take care of yourself tonight. Reach out to someone safe. For support after violence or trauma, you can contact the National Center for Victims of Crime, Victim Connect Resource Center at 1-855-4-VICTIM or visit victimconnect.org. You are not alone, and your safety matters. Thank you for listening to Malice in the Mitten. I tell these stories because victims deserve more than silence. Families deserve more than forgetting, and communities deserve the truth, even when the truth is painful. I'm Tracy Preston.
And I'm Christine Mulligan.
And this is Malice in the Mitten, where the story matters,
but the truth matters more.
And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, hit those 5 shining stars. So thanks everyone, and we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin.
Bye.
Bye.